And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. Tonight we continue our series breaking down all of the MLB teams as they gear up for the 2025 season. The latest installment tonight, the New York Mets. How do they stand with their roster? What's up next for them? What holes are left on this roster? Where do they finish in 2025? And ultimately, how will they perform in the postseason? Other headlines include what's going on with the Boston Red Sox after they make the deal with Alex Bregman. An update anyway on Nolan Arenado's market. We'll check in on the Shohei Ohtani and Jacob Degrom updates there for the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Texas Rangers. Much, much more ahead here next at the Upside. And welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us late on a Saturday evening. Hopefully you guys had some fun on Valentine's weekend, gearing up for a busy Sunday in the world of sports. Hopefully we'll have some fun with the Four Nations. We'll have some fun with the All-Star Game. Hopefully it's better than it has been for years. But getting back to baseball, we have some headlines that we need to discuss. Tonight's show will get into the New York Mets and how they're set up for the success in 2025, or lack thereof. You'll have to pay attention later on to see where we ultimately finish, or think they'll finish this year. But be sure to hit that like and subscribe if you are new here at the Upside. We cover the MLB here pretty exclusively over the last couple of months anyway. Cover a little bit of the NBA, NFL, and the NHL as well. But primarily, we cover the MLB every single night. We'll bring you the latest from baseball, keep you guys up to date on all the latest rumors, headlines, transactions, injury news, lineup projections, rotations, bullpens, prospects, everything and everything you could possibly want to know about Major League Baseball. We keep you guys up to date here at the Upside. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe, turn on your alerts, follow us over on X at Upside Ascend, and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. We'll start with the Boston Red Sox. They make the deal with Alex Bregman, 3 years, $120 million with deferrals, of course. It's going to have about $60 million in deferrals from what I've heard so far. Sounds like about half of his average annual value every single year is going to be deferred. Either way, great deal for Alex Bregman. Red Sox ultimately gave him what he wanted as far as the AAV. They got what they wanted in the short-term deal. So kind of a win-win for me. Nobody got everything that they wanted, which is generally what you see in free agency deals here. So what does this mean for the Boston Red Sox? Well, they're going to have to figure out where they're going to play Bregman first and foremost. Remember, he was a third baseman for the Houston Astros. Obviously, they have Devers over there right now. Maybe they move Devers off of third. He did express some willingness to move off of third as the offseason went along. Initially, he said, no way, I'm not moving off of third base. It's my home. And seemed to have a change of heart around the turn of the calendar to 2025. So we'll have to see what it means for him at third base. Bregman, of course, could play second base. They could have a prospect there playing as well. So we'll see what they decide to do. And again, at first base, they really like Tristan Casas over there. Yoshida's your DH currently. Obviously, Bregman is an upgrade there. So we'll have to see how this lineup ultimately shakes out. But defensively, I think their best alignment is Bregman at third base. We'll see if they go that direction. Next up, Shohei Ohtani and Jacob Degrom took to the mound today, throwing their first bullpen sessions of spring training. Good for both of them. I think Degrom was kind of pushed back a little bit as they try to work with his innings throughout the year. No need to have him start opening day. That's probably going to be Nathan Eovaldi's job anyway. And so why not go ahead and have him start out as, say, the fourth starter out of 5 to begin the year for Texas, mainly just to kind of limit his innings as opposed to having him pitch opening day and then pitch as many times as possible throughout the year. You'd love to have that for Jacob Degrom. Don't get me wrong. He is the best pitcher on the Rangers roster when healthy. But the question is, how are you going to preserve his health? And the Rangers have decided, it sounds like, to act early here by going ahead and having him scheduled last for all the bullpens that they had set up for all the pitchers they were bringing in to spring training. So we'll have to see what this means for Jacob Degrom, if this throws a wrench in some of the plans that some fans might have made as far as ticket purchases. But I think Degrom being healthy is the first and biggest priority for the Texas Rangers and their fan base. So we'll have to see how he performs. As far as Shohei Ohtani, he threw a bullpen today, throwing between 92 and 94 miles an hour. The main thing is that both of these guys got out of that bullpen session looking healthy. That's the main thing here. Ohtani is not expected to start the season in the rotation for the Dodgers. The other thing is he's not expected to go to a minor league rehab assignment to at least build up some innings as well. So he's going to do it on the fly at the big league level. Big risk, especially with him not having thrown a pitch in over a year now, almost a year and a half. We'll have to see how Shohei adapts to the major league level this year and see if he continues to have that big stick that he had last year that ultimately got him the MVP. Now, let us know in the chat who you think is ultimately going to have the better year, Shohei Ohtani or Jacob Degrom. I'm going to go ahead and lead Shohei Ohtani because he can do it both with the offense and with the pitching. But I'm going to say Jacob Degrom might stay the healthier of the two because it's going to be less taxing on him to play just as a pitcher. Whereas Ohtani's going to be asked to do quite a bit there with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Understandably, they're a very deep team. They don't have to rush him at any point, which is kind of my point here as well. Texas needs Degrom to be good, whereas the Los Angeles Dodgers can sit back and hope that he's healthy come playoff time and just live with the results at that point. They're not counting on him, unlike Texas, which will be counting on a solid season at the very least from Jacob Degrom. So we'll have to see how he performs. Health is a big factor, and we'll see how it ultimately goes. Welcome in, Rafe. Yes, you are finally back on top. Welcome in, Holly Verlis. Do you think JT will re-sign with the Phillies or test the market for his last big payday? Honestly, I think this thing probably goes to free agency. I think the player in Real Muto is going to want a little bit too much. I think the Phillies are a little bit hamstrung financially, and yes, they're going to need a catcher, obviously. Real Muto has been the best catcher in the sport over the last 5, 6, 7 years since he's joined Philadelphia. Second closest is Will Smith, or the next closest anyway, is Will Smith, a full 6 or 7 wins above replacement below him. I still think he's got a little bit left in the tank. The question is, how much is he really going to want? And with the Phillies being cash-strapped, I'm not sure they're going to be the best fit for him. I think there are other teams that are going to have interest in JT Real Muto that will be willing to pay him a little bit more than the Philadelphia Phillies will. He is very ingrained in that Philadelphia community ever since being traded from the Miami Marlins. And maybe he'll take a little bit of a discount. We've seen those kinds of things happen before. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw it here, but I'm leaning towards that he's going to be hitting free agency, and we'll see what kind of numbers ultimately come his way in the offseason. But to answer your question, do I think he will resign or extend, I should say? No. Resign possibly after he hits free agency. I do think he will at least test the market. I'm not sure how much of a big payday he's going to have. I just think this is his last, hurrah, getting a decent salary. I don't think he's going to get anywhere near top of the value there. Rafe, if Degrom stays healthy, he cleans the floor with Ohtani. I don't know about cleans the floor with. That's a little strong. I think Ohtani's still going to have a good year. I just think the Dodgers are going to be a lot more careful with him this year, especially with their added depth in that rotation, the depth in that lineup that they now possess that they didn't have last year. They're not going to have to rely on Ohtani to do quite as much, and that's why I think a Degrom for the Texas Rangers is going to be asked to do more for the pitching side for Texas than what Ohtani will be asked to do, at least during the season, for the Dodgers at the plate and on the mound. All right, a few other news and notes that I wanted to get to today. The CBA, there was a couple of different articles that I saw today that came out saying how this is going to be a reckoning for MLB Players Association and all the players because of how poorly some of the big contracts have gone. They cited the example of Anthony Rendon, Xander Bogaerts, Chris Bryant, and a couple other really bad deals. Understandably, there's some really awful deals. Javi Baez was one of the deals that they mentioned as well. I get it. There are some long-term deals that ultimately don't work out. Usually for position players, if you're signing them into their age 40 season, the second half of that deal usually doesn't look nearly as good as the first half of that deal. But by and large, the big contracts that we've seen signed over the last, say 6 or 7 years, especially since this new CBA has come into place, have generally worked out. I'm not sure that the CBA is necessarily to be blamed for the long-term deals that we're seeing. I will say that deferrals have certainly been a new animal in this negotiation that will have to be addressed, and I think it will be. But as far as saying that the CBA is going to be a reckoning for players, they're going to have to figure out having a cap on the number of years that they can sign for. That Juan Soto getting 15 years should not even be possible in baseball. That's not going to happen. Major League Players Association is not going to agree to those terms, even if you cancel a full season of this year. Even if you say, hey, we want a salary cap, Players Association is going to be more than willing to sacrifice a full season on the field to keep those things from happening. And so I just don't think these things are going to come to pass. Now, the CBA, there are tons of bigger issues that they're going to have to address. One, of course, the deferrals. That will be an easy slam dunk. That will be closed quite easily there. Players Association doesn't have much of a leg to stand on as far as the deferrals because it's just going to cost their players in future years. By limiting the deferrals now, yes, it will limit the amount of money that players can get right now, but it does bode well for the future generations of Major League Baseball players that they don't have those deferrals still lingering on the books. They've done a nice job getting some payments to older players of previous generations as well, getting them their, quote, pension fund. I would like to see that be addressed as well. Then as far as the international draft, I think that'll be the next big hot topic item on the agenda for the CBA. They've got like 12 big items they're going to have to address. We'll see if they solve all of them, but it looks like we're going to be headed for a work stoppage in 2027. All right, a few other news and notes. I was just watching a ton of spring training videos before I came on. I kind of lost track of time, honestly, because it's so much fun actually to see baseball once again. I mean, it's been a crazy year. I think all of us can agree to that. It's been a crazy last several months, especially, not just in sports, but in the world. And it's just nice to just sit back there and just watch somebody, throw a few pitches to his catcher, 30 pitches, 40 pitches, whatever the case may be, and then hang it up for the day. You flip on to the next video and just sit back and just enjoy, seeing your favorite players take the mound once again. Seeing how players are recuperating, checking in on all the articles out there about their health, all those kinds of things. That's what you want to see right now in spring training, is that your team is healthy, that there's no setbacks, that you're not having a guy lost due to Tommy John, which unfortunately I saw one article, I believe it was a Red Sox piece anyway, that is going to be headed for Tommy John surgery, unfortunately, already. But you want to see teams go out of spring training healthy, and hopefully not with a whole bunch of colds or viruses, which is usually what we see in the spring as well. I remember a start made by, I want to say it was Vicente Padilla, the Texas Rangers pitcher, back when they started the season against Seattle, in Seattle. He made a start with a flu. That's one of the more famous ones that I remember, that he gave the Rangers, I want to say 6 or 7 innings, when he could, literally had to be, taking fluids in throughout the entirety of his start there. You want to see teams get out of the spring training healthy. Of course, no arm injuries, no hamstring pulls, nothing like that. but you want to make sure that you're not getting each other sick. That's why the Rangers, for instance, this spring training, instead of doing a handshakes, high fives, that kind of thing, the only thing that the front office is really kind of allowing them to do is fist bumps, just to kind of keep the viruses and cold symptoms down as much as possible, especially early in spring training. Alrighty, let's go ahead and just a couple more items that I wanted to touch on before we get into our New York Mets preview. Nathaniel Lowe had an arbitration case against the Washington Nationals. He was traded there in exchange for Robert Garcia, who does have a little bit of a nerve issue right now for the Texas Rangers. But according to Robert Garcia, it's all but gone according to him. Sounds like he'll be making his first bullpen in the next day or so. I would not be surprised to see him start the season fully healthy with the Texas Rangers. But as far as Nathaniel Lowe goes, this continues a trend for first baseman. Lowe lost his arbitration case against the Washington Nationals, the team that just acquired him. And the reason why this continues the trend is that first basemen in baseball are just not being paid anymore. Yes, they're paid generally for their power, but they realize, hey, their defense isn't necessarily as valuable as a shortstop, decreases their value. Their long-term ability to stay healthy and produce at a high level also decreases their value. And Nathaniel Lowe specifically isn't exactly a home run hitter, at least to date, and that's going to decrease his value once again. Now, am I saying Nathaniel Lowe upsetting him by having this arbitration case go forward into the hearing itself and not come to a deal beforehand is going to be a big blow to this organization? No, I'm not crazy enough to say something like that. But I will say going into an arbitration case with the guy that you just traded for is not necessarily a great look going into the year. But I will say Nathaniel Lowe, I hope, is going to have a better case once he hits free agency, because he is a very good defender. He does things that other first basemen don't really do, which is hit for contact. Doesn't strike out a whole bunch, but doesn't necessarily get into the power that he shows during batting practice. I'd love to see him get into a little bit more of that power, and then he'll get a little bit more of a payday. But as it stands right now, he might miss out on that big payday that he's hoping for. Hoping the best for him. Great guy, and we'll just see how it goes. Alex Bregman arrived at Boston Red Sox camp today, signed a bunch of autographs. At first I saw the video and I thought he was wearing Astros colors because the video was so poor, but no, he was in Boston Red Sox gear, and he will at least play one season with the Red Sox this year, and if he has a great season, he might parlay that into a long-term deal in free agency. Last bit of news, the Minnesota Twins are going to go ahead and start Ty France at first base. They just signed him to a deal just a couple of days ago. A little bit surprised that they're going to go ahead and say, yep, he's already won the spot before they've had any type of competition or even offered a platoon. Nope, their manager came out and said, nope, Ty France will be our starter. And I guess they just wanted some stability there, especially with the offseason not exactly being flush with moves for the Minnesota Twins. They're going to have to get their improvements wherever they can, and I'm hoping the best for Ty France. But the numbers for him have been steadily declining, and honestly, they're one of the worst in baseball as far as defense is concerned, and the offense ain't much better over the last couple of years. Hopefully he has a renaissance there in Minnesota. Great Renaissance Fair, by the way, in Minneapolis, if you guys ever get to go. Speaking of Renaissance, anyway, just popped into my head. Last bit of news, before I forget, anyway, Kyle Finnegan and the Washington Nationals are still discussing a deal in free agency. So we discussed him being one of the buy low candidates as a closer this offseason. The Texas Rangers are one team that had some interest. The Rangers are indeed poking their nose around on the free agent market for some more relief help as well. They're not just going to sit by and see these other guys go as non-roster invitees to the Dodgers, Yankees, Mets, etc. They want to get one or two of those guys and see if they can get lucky on one of those lottery tickets themselves. But as far as Kyle Finnegan goes, I wonder if he ultimately ends up back in Washington. He had a great first half anyway last year, struggled in the second half. We'll see how it ultimately turns out. You think Ohtani has his worst pitching season since his rookie year, which ain't bad, but still some rust. I'll agree to that to some extent. I'll say that it's going to take him some time, especially since he's not going to get a rehab starts at all. Master Vinman, hey there, late to the party, no problem. Just kind of going over the news and notes of the day, just about to get started on our New York Mets 2025 season preview. If you guys have any questions, anytime, feel free to send them to us. We'll be having an early live tomorrow. I have some plans in the evening, so we'll probably do our live in the morning tomorrow. Hopefully my plans will end a little bit earlier and I can do another live in the evening as always. but I want to make sure I give you guys your daily updates. So we're going to do one tomorrow earlier on the day. I'd guess probably 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. So be sure to join us early on for that video. We'll continue our series here. One team every single day as we build up to the start of spring, or towards the start of the opening day of the MLB season. Tomorrow we'll go ahead and do one of the teams that's not expected to be in contention. We'll stay on the National League side of things and do the Colorado Rockies. So be sure to join us for that one as well. Ramirez being 3-0 with a 4.35 ERA, so wild. All right. Thank you guys for joining us. Let's go ahead and get started on our New York Mets, update video for our spring. For those of you who have not joined us, we did the Cubs just a couple of days ago. We did the Dodgers last night, and we'll get started on the New York Mets here in just a second. Or not wild, but just looks weird. Okay. All right. Appreciate you guys joining us. Let's go ahead and get started here. And welcome into the 2025 season preview for the New York Mets here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us this evening. The New York Mets had a great offseason. If you guys hadn't heard, they signed the richest contract in professional sports history, bringing in Juan Soto on a 15-year, $765 million deal. They continue to add to their rotation, bringing in Sean Manaea, Frankie Montas, Clay Holmes, and others. They still have some holes in that rotation. We'll go ahead and dig into some of those spots here in just a moment. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe if you are new here. We're going to break down every single team as we build up towards the start of the MLB season. We already have done the Cubs, the Dodgers. Tonight we're doing the Mets, and we'll continue our series every single day up until the start of the MLB season. So go ahead and hit that like, subscribe, follow us on X at UpsideSN, and on Facebook at Upside Sports Network. Let's go ahead and get into their lineup. Looking at their depth chart going into the season here, go ahead and pause that video so it doesn't give any noise to you guys. They're going to have Francisco Lindor probably leading off, Juan Soto following, and then you have Pete Alonso. Alonso signing that deal late in the offseason, essentially a 2-year deal with opt-out after the first year, obviously. He's going to get $30 million from the Mets in year one. We'll have to see what this deal ultimately comes to for him, if he's going to opt into free agency next year and try to parlay that into a long-term deal. But you look at this lineup, if they didn't make the deal with Pete Alonso, then you're probably talking about, say, a Mark Vientos bumping up in the lineup here just a little bit, or somebody along those lines. I think this lineup would really be lacking the depth that they needed to have. Sure, Juan Soto certainly would have been a big improvement for them, but losing Pete Alonso would have been a significant step backward as well. So 2 steps forward bringing in Soto, 1 step backward losing Pete Alonso. I don't think that was necessarily tenable. And when Pete Alonso basically says, hey, I want to be a New York Met, I'm only willing to take a short-term deal with the New York Mets, you can see how the Mets got the short-term deal that they were looking for, while Pete Alonso and Scott Boras got the AAV that they were looking for a year away from Vlad Guerrero Jr. hitting free agency next year. Brandon Nimmo is going to be your left fielder. It looks like Vientos, Winker signed later in free agency as well. Francisco Alvarez believes they have the best offensive, or the best lineup in the sport right now. So we'll have to see if he can back up those words this year. Strong words from a very braggadocious catcher there. Jeff McNeil at second, and then Jose Siri looks like he's going to lock down that center field spot, at least to begin the season. Not a bad lineup. I think they could use another depth piece as the year goes along. As far as the pieces that they're counting on towards the bench right now, Luis Torrens, Nick Madrigal, Starling Marte, who has been dangled in pretty much all trade talks this offseason, with the Mets willing to eat the entirety of Starling Marte's deal in order to just get a middle reliever from somebody. So we'll have to see if they get that deal done at some point. Looking at Tyrone Taylor, another outfielder that they're projecting will be on the opening day roster for them. Now, as far as you look at the far side of the screen there, the WAR projections, there's only 2 guys that are projected to be over a 4 WAR. So I know WAR isn't everything, but it does give you an indication of how valuable a player might be. And yes, these are projections, but there are a couple of players that you look at this lineup and say, hey, maybe they'll do a little bit better than what you're expecting. Mark Vientos is one where they have him at 3.5, Maybe he has a 5-WAR season. They're going to need some production from third base. They've got some good young depth coming, young infield prospects that are coming. Luis Angel Acuna, Mauricio as well. They got some talent coming. The question is, how does that talent ultimately play on a team that's trying to push for a World Series? That's the bigger issue for the Mets, is they're trying to compete for a World Series. Dodgers are the heavy favorite on paper. They're going to need some help in that rotation, but this lineup is where they're going to, this is where their bread is going to be buttered here. If this team is going to go anywhere this season, this offense is going to be the part that's going to have to carry it for them. Looking at their rotation, they're probably going to go with a 6-man rotation. Senga, they have him as their number 2. I think he's their number 1 when healthy. That's the big question mark there, of course, for him. Sean Manaea, I think he had a great year last year, and I think he's going to have an even better year this year. I know everybody's down on the Mets rotation, but I like those two as the 1-2 here. I think Manaea on a playoff roster is probably more of a number 3 until he continues that progression we saw last year and proves it once again. But I think Senga's a good enough option to be in that 1 or 2 spot in a postseason series. But they need to add another starter to this rotation to really be a threat come postseason. I think they're going to be great for the 162. The question is, how do they match up once you get to October? The rest of this rotation: Frankie Montas, David Peterson, Clay Holmes, and Paul Blackburn. They have Peterson in this rotation, but there are a couple of guys that they can turn to if necessary. Griffin Canning as well is one of those pieces. They have a couple of guys that they can turn to if they have injury issues. When you have Senga, who missed some time last year, and a couple of guys who are trying to transition to starting roles or coming back from injury, you're going to need some depth there, and the Mets do have a little bit. I still would like them to go out there and add another number 1 at the deadline this year. I don't think it'll happen before the season, but we'll see if they can get that one done. Looking at this Mets roster, though, the lineup is pretty good, especially the top here: Lindor, Soto, and Alonso. We talked about the Dodgers last night and how they were top-heavy for the last couple of years. That's kind of what this lineup looks like to me. They're very top-heavy with Lindor, Soto, and Alonso. Nimmo, to me, had a little bit... he's kind of an up-and-down player for me. I'm not sure if he's a good enough player to be in your top 5 anymore. Vientos is going to have to prove it. He's only played in the big leagues for a year and change now, only a year of service time, as you can see on the screen. But I think now is the year he's going to be, given all of the opportunity to really produce at the big league level. I like the addition of Winker, gives them some depth there as far as an corner outfielder or DH option. I think you could even play first base if you needed to, but if Alonso goes down to injury at some point. And then Francisco Alvarez, I think, is one of the better young catchers in the game. But I think there's a need here for another good offensive piece here as you get closer to the deadline as well. Mets, if they're going to be in contention this year, I think there's a good chance that they will ultimately make the additions that we're needing to see from them. Looking at this bullpen here, Edwin Diaz, of course, is your closer. They brought in A.J. Minter on a 2-year, $22 million deal. Last played, I believe, for the Atlanta Braves last year. Quietly has been one of the 10 best relievers over the last 5 years. I don't think anybody really has paid much attention to him, but I think he deserves the pub. He's been very good. Then you have Jose Butto, Reed Garrett, Ryan Stanek, Danny Young, and, of course, the guy I mentioned that could be a spot starter for them, Griffin Canning as well. A couple of guys that are going to factor on the injured list: Christian Scott and Drew Smith. They just signed him a couple of days ago. Sounds like he won't be a factor this year, at least early on in the year. Maybe he'll be a depth piece come September, October, around that time of year. But looking at this bullpen, I like Edwin Diaz as your closer. A.J. Minter, having that consistency back there in that bullpen really helps them out. Love Ryan Stanek not being a setup guy, but being one of your middle relievers. I think if you put him in a setup role, I think it's asking a little bit too much from him at this point. And I could see them going another reliever here at the deadline as well. This is a team that, with Steve Cohen's money, could literally do just about anything at the moment. Whereas Nunez, with his injury, we can check in on that one here in just a moment. But looking at this roster, where do you guys see the changes here? For me, obviously, Juan Soto at the top is the biggest improvement to this roster. Jose Siri is quietly going to help out that defense quite a bit for me. I love that addition. You saw some highlights from him in the winter. His speed is real, and I think it's going to be a real factor for the Mets this year. I think that bench could use a little bit of an upgrade this year, but let's kind of continue here with the wins of the offseason for the Mets. Begins here with the Juan Soto deal, obviously getting the crosstown rival, second best player, in my opinion, in Juan Soto. Yes, it is a big deal, 15 for $765, but you have to get the deal done here. You needed to continue the growth that you showed last year, show investment in this team if you're Steve Cohen, and bringing him in really does that to a T. Having Pete Alonso walk out the door would have been a very poor look, for me at least, to this organization. I think Pete Alonso is Mr. Met at this point. I think he's very good as far as being an ambassador for the team, and I think he's going to keep that team in line because I think he's one of the leaders in the clubhouse for them as well. For me, I think this team is a very good lineup. It could be better. I think the rotation is solid for the regular season, but lacks the depth that it needs at the top once you get to October. But as far as wins, Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, getting him on a short-term deal, getting Soto, period, I think that's a win. Bringing back Sean Manaea, that's a win. But as far as what are some of the missed opportunities here, possibly going a long-term deal for Corbin Burns, making a trade for Dylan Cease, going after Sandy Alcantara at the trade deadline or Pablo Lopez might be the better long-term play. We'll see if they go that route as well. But those are some opportunities that I see that they could have taken and ultimately might miss on. Now, what could be their big mistake of the offseason? Of course, Juan Soto. If that deal ultimately ages poorly and they don't win, as I get something in my eye, my apologies. If that deal doesn't work out, say you don't win a World Series in the next 5 years, that deal could look like a real albatross very, very quickly. Say he's still hitting very well and you decide to not allow him to opt out of the deal. You bump his AAV from $51 to $55 million per season for another 11 years. That's a lot of money. He's 26 years old. That's why he got the longevity of this deal. So it's going to take him through his age 41 season. He's probably going to retire as a Met unless Cohen eats the money and trades him to somebody else if things don't work out. But I think that's the risk here that they're taking with Juan Soto. That his presence on at the plate, his process that he uses to with each at bat, the deliberate way he acts with each strike or ball call, with the swing that he does ultimately take, avoiding chasing bad pitches. I think that's really going to age well for him. Defensively, there's going to be a little bit of an issue for him. I think that his defense might fall off in year 6, 7 of this deal, and then you're looking at him as a long-term DH from basically age 32 on. That's basically 6 or 7 years more of him as a DH on this roster. And I wonder, are they willing to have him at that DH spot? Another spot, anyway, that they could be looking to add a DH in the future would be Vlad Guerrero Jr. If they sign him in free agency next year, maybe they'd need to transition him to DH at some point when Soto's going to need that spot, and then your defense really starts to look bad 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the road. But looking at the Mets for 2025, they did a nice job loading up, and they could do even more damage next year in the offseason if they go after Kyle Tucker, if they go after another top-end starter next year. Framber Valdez is going to be a free agent. Dylan Cease, among other top-end starters, are going to be out there that they can try to lure in. We'll see if they add one of those guys. And I didn't even mention Vlad Guerrero, of course. I think there's a good chance the Mets will be in on him as well. Nando Chester, welcome in. Hopefully the Mets cut some gimmicks this year. Cut some of the gimmicks this year. I mean, they're the Mets. They're going to have some of those. All baseball teams do. It's just what baseball does during the long days of the summer. You're just going to get some of that. There is one bit of news anyway today is that Jose Iglesias is holding out hope that he gets a call from the Mets as far as their interest in him. We'll have to see if they go that direction. I don't think there's really a spot for him currently. They did bring in Nick Madrigal. I don't think they're going to go that direction to go bring back Jose Iglesias. His BABIP numbers were a little inflated last year. Tells you that he was a little bit more successful than he might normally be with his batting average on balls in play, and tells you he might have gotten a little bit lucky, and so might be due for a little bit of regression. Sure, he was a nice presence in that clubhouse and worked well with the fans, obviously, but I don't think you're necessarily signing a guy for what he does as far as in the clubhouse, when you already have your roster pretty much built up for spring training. I think they have enough clubhouse guys already on this roster to where I think Jose Iglesias is going to get a good deal from another team, maybe even the crosstown rival New York Yankees. Speculated about that one quite a bit over the offseason. That's been one name that's been brought up many, many times in conversations with Yankees officials with multiple different reporters. Alrighty. As far as their payroll, let's take a look and see where their payroll situation sits. Nope, as it jumps on me there. Their estimated payroll is going to be around $331 million. That's about $5 million less than what it was last year. And looking at their roster, let's go ahead and scroll down here to show you the ultimate totals here. Remember, the top luxury tax threshold is $301. They're going to eclipse that, and they did so by bringing back Pete Alonso there. So they're going to have $324-ish million in commitments. no matter what they're doing right now, they may still add even more salary, signing a guy in free agency, going in a trade route, bringing in a Vladdy at the trade deadline, bringing in Dylan Cease at the trade deadline. All of these things still remain on the table, but look how quickly their payroll drops. Next year they're going to be at 206, the following year 181, the next year 126, and so forth and so on. This is an opportunity for them to really capitalize on the money of Steve Cohen and push their chips to the center. Understandably, the Dodgers are the favorite, but they have to go out there and win. And I love the addition of Juan Soto for this lineup. I would be surprised if they don't continue to add over the next couple of years. This is a team that is primed to win now, and they have some pieces for the future as well. We'll see what ultimately they choose to do as far as the direction of this Mets organization. As far as the prospects, I want to touch on a couple of those. They only have a couple of top 100 guys right now, Brendan Sproat and Jet Williams, but they have some really good ones further on down. Drew Gilbert, Ryan Clifford, the two guys that they gotten from the Astros and the Justin Verlander deal, both I think are going to be impact players at the big league level. I think they'll be better than a utility player at the very least anyway. Ronnie Mauricio is going to be a nice piece for them going forward. Might be a trade piece if they decide to bring in a big piece. He might be the piece that goes out in as far as a top prospect there. And then Luis Angel Acuna. I think he fits in at number 12 right now in the 2024 ranks for them. I wonder if he bumps up a little bit in the 25 rankings, which have yet to come out for MLB.com. But they have some good depth in that prospect system now after trading away Scherzer and Verlander, eating their salaries as much as they did, and bringing back premium prospects in return. Love what they did doing that, and then nobody expected them to be in contention last year. This was supposed to have been a retooling, rebuilding year for the Mets, and ultimately, you get to the deadline, and hey, there's the Mets. They get all the way to the NLCS last year. Just a great year from top to bottom for the Mets last year, and then they go out and get the top fish in free agency in Juan Soto. Rod, welcome in. If the Jays don't sign Vladdy to a long-term extension, I'm changing teams. Well, I just don't think it's going to sign, or that he's going to sign an extension at this point. Vladdy did put in a lot of work. We saw a couple of hype videos anyway. Buster only posted one anyway. Excited to see what Vladdy does this year. He did have some optimism about playing third base and first base this year, kind of increasing his free agent profile. We'll have to see what kind of number he ultimately gets. I'm expecting somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 million for Vladdy, especially if he shows that he can play third base this year. But the Blue Jays certainly need some consistency in that organization, so I get your comment there, Rod. I really hope that they get that deal done. I just think he's going to go to free agency, and if he does, I think the Blue Jays would be wise to just cut bait and just see what they can get for him at the trade deadline. Even if they're, say, 5 games out of the wild card, I would see what I could get for Vladdy at that point. If it doesn't look like he's going to sign the deal in the offseason or hasn't given you any indication that he will, I think you have to cut your losses and just try to recoup as much value as you can by dealing him at that point. As far as the other holes on this roster for the Mets, the biggest issue for me is that they need another number one at the top of this rotation. Senga is kind of a pseudo one for me because he's not healthy enough. And so I can't really count on him to be there in October when you need him because he's not really healthy enough to get you there. Or to at least be available once you get there. So let's go ahead and head over to baseball trade values. And I wanted to get into some trades here with the New York Mets. What could they do to address their biggest need, which is a number one? Looking at these teams, do the Angels have a number one that they're willing to trade? No. Astros, Framber Valdez, if they don't get that extension done, maybe they revisit those talks if they're out of it by the All-Star break. Athletics, they don't have anybody that would qualify as an ace. Blue Jays, they have a couple of pieces that are nice 2-3 type of starters, but not a number one. Braves, you're not trading anything within the division between those two teams, at least right now. Brewers, they're looking for starting pitching. They ain't trading it away. Cardinals, they could be moving on from Sonny Gray at the deadline if he decides to ultimately decide to get traded. Cardinals are kind of respecting his wishes to not be traded at this point. But as far as the Cardinals go, they're going to be a retooling team, and Sonny Gray isn't at number one. Cubs, they're not going to deal you number one. Diamondbacks, they have a couple of starters headed toward free agency. If things go poorly to start the year, maybe they open up things there. But I don't think that really solves the issues for the Mets either. Dodgers, they're not going to trade you any of their starters. Giants, Verlander's there. You have Logan Webb there. They're not going to trade you anybody as they're trying to build this thing up. Guardians, they have some good young pitching. They might trade you a starter there if they get some great long-term pieces from it. We'll kind of revisit them later on. Mariners, the Luis Castillo rumors this offseason. I think I've been quietly put to bed now by that Mariners front office. They do not want to deal Luis Castillo. They want to keep this rotation together. We'll have to see how this rotation looks at the deadline, but that would be another piece I would check in at, say, around the All-Star break and just see about his availability. Marlins, that's the first one we get to that there's a definite ace that will be available at the trade deadline. And the reason why we know he's available is because that was the Marlins' plan last year, was to trade a lot of their starting pitching to get some young guys in this system here and just see what kind of success they can have in 3-4 years. So Alcantara has some good trade value. You're going to have to show that he's healthy and so forth in the first half. Once he reestablishes his value, then I think the Mets could be a team that swoops in here. Let's go ahead and look at his value. You're looking for Sandy Alcantara on 48.6. Looking at what the Mets could have to offer, you're not going to trade a piece off of your big league roster here. Sproat Jet Williams as a number one piece in this deal could be a great piece. Remember, the Marlins are looking for guys 20 and under to get this deal done. So I think the first piece that makes sense is Jet Williams. Might hurt their long-term ability, as far as a team, but I think that would be the first player that they might have interest in. Jesus Baez would be another one. Jeremy Rodriguez would be another one there. Let's go ahead and do Baez and just look at where the value is with just those two pieces in there. You're already up to 38. You only need about 10 more. You already got two good top-end pieces going there. Let's see if there's anything else that makes sense in this range besides Rodriguez. You got a couple of 19-year-olds at 8.2. Boston Barrow, I've seen his name dangled quite a bit in trade talks. Let's go ahead and put him in this deal. That gets you to 46. And then let's go for a starting pitcher. A younger starting pitcher or a young catcher, even better. I know the Marlins are looking for position players primarily in those type of trades. So there's your deal. 4 young 20 and under pieces go from the Mets farm system to the Marlins in exchange for Sandy Alcantara. This is the type of move that could make you a legitimate contender with your pitching staff by having Sandy Alcantara at the head of that rotation. Let's validate the trade. Fair trade posted to the trade board. And then there's our deal. Sandy Alcantara to the Mets in exchange for Jet Williams, Jesus Baez, Boston Barrow, and Giovanni Rodriguez. Remember, the Marlins are looking for 20 and under position player prospects primarily. But this would be a great package. A couple of good headliners there and some good depth in the 18 and 19-year-old that might have some growth in them as well. If I'm the Mets, I'd probably do this deal because I see my title window as right now. And just try to win it this year and try to beat the Los Angeles Dodgers. Dodgers are set for basically the next 5, 6, 7 years to have some really good success. They ain't going anywhere, so now's as good a time as any to push your chips to the center here for Sandy Alcantara. Another piece that makes some sense is a guy like Pablo Lopez. We'll go ahead and do a trade here for one of the expiring deals here in Dylan Cease to kind of wrap up the starting pitcher side of things here for the Mets. Let's pull them up here. There's the Mets. Now, if the financial gurus there in San Diego have their way, they would like to have the Padres cut a little bit of payroll. The number one guy to do that right now appears to be Robert Suarez, but doesn't look like there's been too much activity on him. Haven't heard a team in connection with him outside of the Rangers and Diamondbacks earlier this offseason. Diamondbacks obviously just added Kendall Graveman. Rangers are still looking for some bullpen help. Maybe there's a fit there. But as far as the Padres, if they need to offload a little bit more money, the one way that they can do it, the biggest way that they can do it, is by moving Dylan Cease. So he has the biggest trade value. You're going to get a nice return for him. So you go back over to the Mets side of things. You need to get up to about 33. So I think with Dylan Cease being an expiring deal, I think you can avoid giving up your top end pieces here. So we're talking about avoiding Jet Williams, avoiding Brandon Sproat. I think you might have to include Jesus Baez to be kind of your headliner of this deal. So we'll include him. We'll include Jeremy Rodriguez as well. There's your two pieces there. You're already at 29. Maybe one more 5, 6, 7 value piece might get it done here. Let's go ahead and do... Barrow's a little rich. Let's go back over to page 1. Morabito, maybe? That way you don't have to give up another piece. That's a little bit of an overpay, so let's go ahead a little bit cheaper. Let's go back over to page 2. Let's say they go with a younger starting pitcher like Jonah Tong, somebody in that value range, and there you go. Let's validate the trade, post it, and there's your trade for a rental option if you're the Mets. Rod might have to go back to the Red Sox, which my team were before. That'd be a good team for you. They're an up-and-coming team. They look like they're going to be good for the next 5, 6, 7 years. Michael, the Anthony Rendon bobblehead night is of him on the IL. I'd imagine so at this point. I think they just need to cut bait with him and just release him for the Los Angeles Angels. I think that's the best for both sides. A player that Jim Bowden was on Foul Territory earlier this week and had some really strong words about Nolan Arenado and that contract. He said at the time when he was a free agent, when that deal was signed, he knew it was going to be bad because Rendon was not about baseball. He doesn't love baseball. And so to him, baseball is just a job. That means his incentive to really work and try to improve on his craft day in, day out isn't really there the same way other players really had it. And so he knew there was going to be struggles, and he proved to be correct. Looking at Rendon, though, I think injuries have played a big part in what he's been able to do on the field. But when he's been healthy, he hasn't been very good either. So can't really defend him as far as the production that they've gotten for that big contract that they signed there in Los Angeles. That is part of the reason why Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout really didn't make it to the postseason, because the pieces they invested in didn't ultimately work out. All right, let's kind of wrap up our discussion here on the New York Mets here. How does their offseason grade for 2025 or 2024, 2025? I'll give them a B+. The biggest reason because they got Juan Soto. They got the big fish. But they didn't do enough as far as I'm concerned to address that starting staff. I think they are a little bit light. I am going to defend that rotation. I think they're still going to be good enough in the 162. As long as they add a number one by the deadline, I think they'll be fine. But I think you're going to have to add a number one. And for missing out on the opportunity to get some of these starters that are still out there, or that were out there earlier this offseason, even in trade, I think is a misstep here for the organization. Maybe they make a trade here, but I think that's a big need that they're going to have to figure out. As far as where do they finish, I really like the Mets this year. I'm very, very bullish on where they are as far as that lineup, and I think they will add the pieces they need at the deadline, Steve Cohen, etc. This is a contending team. Do I think they'll contend for a World Series? I do. I think they're that good. As far as this division, you got 5 teams in there, of course. You got the Marlins, you got the Nationals. Both of those probably not going to be factors for the top of the crown, or top of the division for the crown. You had the Braves, the Phillies, and then the Mets kind of vying it out, or duking it out for that top spot in the division. I think this is a team that's guaranteed to at least get a wild card this year, but I'm going to go ahead and say they win the division. I think they're going to get that starting pitcher. I think the 162 team is actually pretty good. Braves are a little bit thin as far as that starting pitching is, as far as I'm concerned as well, and they're just one more big injury away from having to patch together that rotation on the fly. Meanwhile, the Philadelphia Phillies didn't do enough this offseason. I don't like the addition of Jesus Luzardo. Kepler should be good, at least get Castellanos off his feet for here and there. He should be a little bit better. But this team is going to have to count on Trey Turner and other internal improvements in order to really make a difference from where they were last year. This is a team we thought was going to shake it up this offseason, and they never really did much of anything at all. And that's kind of one of my bigger surprises this offseason, that Dave Dombrowski sat on his hands when there was an opportunity to shake this club up and try to push it forward just by brute force. And ultimately, he chose not to do that. And like I said, I hate the trade that they made for Jesus Luzardo for both the Marlins and the Phillies. I don't think it'll work out for either side. I think the Marlins could have done better as far as the return. I think the Phillies could have done better as far as adding a starting pitcher. I get it. You're worried about Taijuan Walker in that rotation. I would be too after how bad he was last year. But there are other options that they could have gone with, and they chose to do this one. We'll have to see how it works out. As far as the expectations for the roster, how do I think they'll do? Let's kind of flip it back over to their depth chart again. I think this is the lineup that's going to do some damage. I think they'll be in the top 10 offensively. I think there's a case to be made that they'll be in the top 5 as far as best offenses in the game. And yet I still think they could add one more bat to really push this thing forward for that Mets organization. As far as this the pitching staff goes, there's not a lot of depth here as far as some of the high-end options. They have some good options as far as 4th, 5th, 6th reliever, or 6th starters anyway, but nobody at the top of the rotation. That kind of worries me going into the season. They're going to have to address it. So as far as what could we see as far as trades, we just did a couple of them for some starting pitching. They could do some for some hitting as well, if necessary, at the deadline. So we'll have to see how that works out. But I will say they will make the playoffs. How far will they go in the playoffs? I think they will very likely meet in the NLCS with the Dodgers. I think those two teams are destined right now, unless the Phillies surprise us, unless the Braves surprise us. I don't think there's a team in the Central Outside of the Cubs, if they had added Alex Bregman, that could have made a run here, but they didn't add Alex Bregman. I think they're going to fall a little bit short of their, quote, all-in goal for 2025 and ultimately have to go through a short rebuild, retool phase there in Chicago. Rod, I'm going to say Dodgers versus Red Sox World Series. I think the Dodgers are the chalk right now on the NL side. A lot of pub right now about the Dodgers kind of feeling the pressure a little bit early on in the offseason or early on in spring training already about how good this team is and how well they're expected to perform. You never really want to see that be brought to the team because that generally causes more pressure and other issues. You want to keep the team free and loose because players generally tend to play better in those situations. But like I said, I'm giving them a B plus for their offseason this year. Growth and surprises, where could we be surprised most? And that's going to be on the offensive side from some of the youth options that they're going to have. Mauricio, Acuna, Gilbert, other pieces on that lineup. And then in the starting staff, they have some good pieces, but nobody really that's challenging from a youth perspective that's going to be in that rotation day in and day out as far as that I would be comfortable with for a team that's trying to vie for a World Series. So we'll have to see which direction they go. I think they will add a number one, and that's kind of where the surprise will come from, is that they're going to make a move at some point this season. I have no doubt, and whatever that move is, I think will make them a much more attractive contender this year in 2025. We already did a little bit of the trades anyway. What is the ceiling for this team? Well, ceiling for this Mets team is obviously to win the World Series. They're a very well-built organization aside from that starting staff as far as I'm concerned. I think they need another number one. Otherwise, I don't think they have a chance to win. I think they'll be very good, especially in the regular season. But once you get to October, it's a different animal. You're immediately going to be down 1-0. If you don't have a number one at that in game one, you don't have a really good number two in game two. And then Sean Manaea is your name game three. I think you're just fine there. But I think they have to add a number one that can take the ball in game one or game two and make sure they get a win on that day. But as far as the floor for this team, say things go poorly. Say Soto gets hurt earlier in the year. Alonso just continues to ground into double plays. Doesn't hit for much average. That offense doesn't carry this team as much as expected. And that pitching staff ultimately shows the warts, that they don't necessarily have the depth that it's necessary. Looking at the expected WAR this upcoming season for the starting rotation, point out any guy you see in this rotation that's going to be above a 3 WAR. That's nobody. That tells me that they are fairly bullish on the fact that they think Kodai Senga, while very good, is going to miss some time this year. Sean Manaea, while good, is going to be continuing to tinker with his mechanics and show that progress he made last year is real. Montas, of course, has his own injury issues in the past. Holmes is going to be transitioning to the starting staff. This team could go south if they have some injury issues, but by and large, I think they're still in good shape. I don't think we'll see too much of the floor. There is every bit the opportunity that they could win the World Series this year. They are a very well-built offensive team that I think will add any and all pieces they need at the deadline if they're in contention. Let's see. Dodgers pitching staff is sick. Couldn't agree more with you, Locksmart. Master Vinman, which NL East team has the best starting rotation? For me, that's the Philadelphia Phillies, even with Jesus Luzardo going in there. Really like what they've got 1 through 3. With Zach Wheeler, of course, I think being one of the best pitchers in that division. And I think there's a good chance that they'll add another one at the top of the rotation with New York, and we'll have to see if that one takes over as the best starter in that division. Sandy Alcantara, I think, by default is the guy, but he's not healthy right now, so we're going to kind of keep him out of this conversation until he returns to form. Other teams that have a really good rotation, Dodgers have the best rotation to me. Diamondbacks have a really good one. As far as NL East team with a good rotation, I'll say the Phillies have the best rotation. Braves have the second best. I like the Nationals rotation, but it's got a lot of youth there. But I'll go ahead and say the Mets are third just because of how young that Nationals rotation is. Marlins have a really good rotation, but all of it's coming back from injury or from poor performance, so I can't put them any higher than that at the moment. Rod, if the Jays trade Vladdy at the trade deadline, where will they trade him to? Pretty much anybody. I think the Yankees are a good bet. The Cubs are a good one. Mets, Astros if they need another bat. I think the Rangers if they decide not to go the platoon thing. The Dodgers might decide to push the pedal down here. Padres could be a fit there. The Giants could be a fit. There's so many teams that could be in there for a first baseman. It's just too early to really speculate with any degree of accuracy. Steven, if the Mets are close at the trade deadline, 100% they will add. Completely agree with you, Steven. I think they will add a number one at the deadline, no matter what they do this offseason or this upcoming season. I think they're going to be a good team this year. I think they'll be in the wild card hunt at the very least, and I think they're going to be a good team. Locksmart Pitt has Skeens, Chandler, and Jones. They are very good in the NL Central. Would I say they're in the top 2 or 3 in the entire NL? Probably not. I'd probably say they're in borderline top 5 category. As they continue to get a little older, a little bit more experience, I think that could elevate, obviously, but they need offense more than anything else right now in Pittsburgh. I just hope they don't sacrifice some of that pitching staff to be able to get that job done. All right, appreciate you guys joining us. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe. We did the Chicago Cubs season preview for 2025 on Thursday. Be sure to check out that live that we did the other day. I will have a video, kind of the shortened version, or the actual 2025 update for the Chicago Cubs coming out sometime in the next couple of days. We did the Dodgers yesterday. We're doing the Mets right now, and we'll do the Rockies tomorrow. Trying to stick on the NL side to begin the season here. We'll probably flip over to the AL side here in a couple of days, just kind of knock out a couple of those. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe. Turn on your notifications so when we do your favorite team, you can be sure to join. Follow us on X at Upside Ascend and on Facebook at Upside Sports Network. Let's go ahead and head over to X and just see if anything else is happening at the moment. Four Nations tournament, by the way, was absolutely great. If you guys didn't catch that USA-Canada game, got off to a great start. Was an absolutely great game to watch. If you guys missed it, I encourage you guys to check out the next one. It's been incredible to watch. Ty France, again, serving as the Twins' primary first baseman. No surprise there. Let's go to the MLB trade rumor sites. Nothing new there. Cutter Crawford is just kind of dealing with some soreness, so hopefully he'll make it in time for the start of the season. But primarily, you just want to be healthy. And no other big news that we saw as far as signings today. There's not a whole lot of free agents that are left out there. We've covered those guys already. Andrew Heaney, David Robertson. A couple other relievers are still out there, including Kyle Finnegan. Those are the names that I'm paying attention to on the hitting side. Justin Turner, J.D. Martinez. Joey Gallo just agreed to a deal with the Chicago White Sox, so his name is no longer out there. Jose Iglesias is one name, and Alex Verdugo is another one that I'm paying attention to. So there is still some talent out there on the free agent market. Not a whole lot of it. Expect the Mariners to add one more bat to that lineup, possibly a Justin Turner. Look for the Padres to make some moves here over the next couple of weeks. Most notably with Robert Suarez for sure, I think will be traded. But they might do some other things if they get a really good, if they get some really good returns on those, starting pitchers that they have out there in trade talks. Rod, congratulations to the U.S. You guys kicked our butts. Yeah, Canada did not play all too well today. I think that they were just trying to find some offense all day long, changing their lines around, especially in that third period, and just could not find any level of consistency there. The U.S. team just played a really good defensive game more than anything else, and it really helps when you have the best goalie in the world right now on your roster. So he might actually get a game off, and they might put in their backup goalie. I think it's Jake Ottinger. We'll have to see if he gets some time. But that's your Four Nations update. Like I said, if you guys want to check out some really great hockey, really encourage you guys to check out the Four Nations tournament. One of the best hockey games I've watched in, years, especially for an exhibition. This was better than playoff intensity in that game. So I really encourage you guys to really check it out. It was fantastic. Alrighty, appreciate you guys joining us. We'll be live again tomorrow morning around 10-ish. We'll do the Colorado Rockies season preview and update you guys on anything that's happening tomorrow morning. So be sure to hit that like, subscribe. We'll see you guys again in the morning, about 11 hours from now. So we'll see you guys then. Appreciate all the support. Thank you for hitting that like and subscribe on the video. It means a lot to us. Thank you for the super chats over the last couple of months. It means a lot to us here, and I just want to say thank you one more time. Y'all have a great night out there. Stay safe out there, and hopefully it doesn't get too cold over the next week. Stay warm out there, everybody.